Thank you. Okay, so today, yes, today's lesson is about chapter 2 and 3 of Sefer Yehoshua, and we're going to review a little bit about Yehoshua. Thank you, Beverly, for giving us a off recording commentary, and we appreciate that. Now, what was it that Yehoshua was looking for from these spies? Do you remember? What was
the military? Oh,
go ahead.
the military end of it, basically, because it was basically the military end of it, and just the placement of the people around them.
And how does he send these spies that are different than Moshe sends the spies?
Secretly.
Go ahead.
Secretly.
He sends them secretly. He doesn't consult with anybody.
Right.
He doesn't have any kind of conversation with anybody. All he wants is a certain amount of information, and he sends these two to find that out. And we find that he goes, the two spies happen to go to the inn that is owned by Rachav. She's a known prostitute, although we did talk about the possibility that she may not. She may have been an innkeeper. However, all indications seem to refer to her as a prostitute or a harlot. And the thing is that in Sefer Yehoshua, there is no judgment about her. In many other instances in Tanakh, we find that there are comments about prostitution and idolatry and leading an evil life or an ungodly life. And in the Sefer Yehoshua, there is no mention whatsoever of any kind of judgment of her profession or what she does.
Right.
So, in fact, we see that, as we're going to find out now, that it is an opportunity that she has to come closer to Hashem, and we're going to see how she does that. Did the spies get the military information they wanted?
I think so.
You think they got the information? Well, it wasn't exactly military information, but they did get information that the people were very frightened of them because they had learned about the Exodus of Egypt and the Sea of Reeds miracle, as well as the God of the Israelites, of the Hebrews, helping win the battle against the war against Sichon and Og, and which happened just a couple months prior to this spy event. So we learned that Rachav makes a deal with the spies, and that the spies agree to it. They tell her exactly the conditions under which she must have her family inside her home, and to display out of the window of her house that is lodged into the outer wall of the city of Jericho, the crimson thread, this rope. And did everybody read the article I sent to you?
Yep.
I sent an article about the crimson rope.
Not yet.
So take it. I would read it if you are interested.
Yeah, very interesting.
I believe Xenia was the one who asked the question, was there any relationship between the red string, the bendel that we wear, many people wear, to ward off of the ayin hara, and was there a relationship between that and the red thread, the red rope? So you can read about that. There are many
Very
different
interesting.
interpretations and explanations. And we also learned that Rachav is quite impressed with the Jewish God, the God of the Hebrews, and she feels in one commentator's explanation, she feels that if the God of Israel would be so concerned about the slaves, the Jewish slaves leaving Egypt, to protect them so much that he would split the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea or Reed Sea, then clearly she could potentially have a relationship with this God because she has been marginalized by society because of her profession. She
Well.
has been kept to the side, to the outer limits of the city because of who she is and what she does by running her inn. And consequently, she is renewed in some way, thinking and feeling that the God of Israel could love her as much as the slaves because she has been with having such a life, a difficult life or a challenging life, and certainly is not part of the community of Yericho. So we recognize that this particular relationship that Rachav has been given by the spies of surviving the war with Yericho, this could very well be an opportunity for her to start a new life. And who else do we know in Tanakh that also hears about the splitting of the Red Sea and is so impressed and so overwhelmed with amazement that they themselves turn to Judaism and accept God of Israel?
Jethro,
Yitro, who is Moshe's
Moshe's
Father-
father-in-law.
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 That's right.
Nineveh.
Who else? Do we know any?
Nineveh.
Who?
Daughter?
Nineveh.
Nineveh?
Nineveh. The city.
The city.
Oh, the city. Oh, well, okay, but that's because
Really?
that's because the message was brought to them about their destruction. But who else? We learn in Malachim that the general Naaman, who was a general for the Babylonians, was very sick with leprosy, and one of the prophets comes and gives him a healing, and he then accepts Hashem as his God. And we also know the famous story of Ruth and Naomi.
Right.
Okay, having said that, we're going to move on. That we consider the matter from the text, the textual standpoint, that we should be careful to as we witness what happens with Rachav and the spies, and that her household will be protected from the Israelite invaders by this crimson cord. And it's not just that she makes a deal with them, but there's a lesson that when she talks about to them, she says, and I have heard about the God in heaven and the God on earth. She is taken by this God. She sees that there is more to God than the idols that they have in Canaan. And the lesson here is that every person is capable of changing the direction of his or her life by willfully choosing a different moral compass. And what this actually says is when confronted in life by challenges, by obstacles, by situations, we ourselves, every person on this earth, can change the way they are going in the direction that they are going if they accept Hashem and the laws and commandments and mitzvot that God has given to us as guidelines for our lives. And that choice can be life altering. We know that. We know that throughout history, and we know it personally from family, friends, and people who have chosen to be Jewish. So having said all that, we end the chapter with the spies being told by Rachav, you go to the west, and she tells the king of Yericho's soldiers to go to the east. And she tells the spies, you wait 3 days because the people chasing you will search. Of course, they're going to go toward the the Jordan River. So you go the opposite way and you stay there for 3 days, because after 3 days they won't find you, and that they will come back home and that you will be safe. So they tell her that she tells them to wait, and that's exactly what happens. And yes.
So many things that I have read in commentary, they called the two spies Caleb and Pinchas. Is that just a story, or is that really what was Caleb and Pinchas? Who are the spies?
I don't know why. I don't know. I don't have any text that says that. Where did you find that?
In this book, the Torah Anthology. Wait.
On
Yehoshua.
Maybe you could send me where it says that, with a reference to it. But don't forget, Pinchas in Tanakh was a zealot, and Caleb was the person with Yehoshua who came back with a positive report. So maybe they say these spies were as the two, as Pinchas and Caleb. I don't know, but we don't get their names, so I'm not sure. Okay, so any other questions or comments? Feel free, sing right out. Okay, all right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to, let's see, share screen.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Yeah.
And we're going to take a look at something that I'm putting online right now. Can you see this? Tell me when you can.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay. So who would like to read part of chapter 3? Do I have a volunteer, or am I gonna have to
I'll read chapter 3.
I could read, Ronda.
all right, Linda, I'm gonna give it to Linda. Your voice is very, very soft, Rhoda. We can barely hear you. So can you now see?
I could read a little bit.
Can you see on the
Okay.
screen?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Okay,
Nothing on the screen.
okay,
It's
all right.
It's still black.
She could be reading, continuing to read.
$2,000 cubits.
All right, Linda, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Were you reading? Because everybody was frozen on my screen.
No, she continued reading.
Yeah,
Rhonda.
she's reading.
Oh,
Start over. if you want.
okay.
All right, I'm on Pasuk, the end of Pasuk 4. Do
No,
not approach closer to it, so that you may know the way in which you should go. For you have not passed this way yesterday or before yesterday. Joshua said to the people, prepare
yeah.
yourselves, for tomorrow Hashem will do wonders in your midst. Joshua then went and passed before the people, so they carried the ark of the covenant and went before the people. Hashem said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, that they may know that just as I was with Moshe, so will I be with you. You shall command the Kohanim, bearers of the ark of the covenant, saying, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. Joshua said to the children of Israel, come here and hear the words of Hashem your God. Joshua said, through this you will know that the living God is in your midst, and he will surely drive away from before you the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Hivite and the Perizzite and the Girgashite and the Amorite and the Jebusite. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the master of all the earth is passing before you in the Jordan.
Okay,
Now,
go ahead,
take for
stop.
yourselves.
Linda, stop. Thank you. Okay,
Okay,
all right, let's go. Let's see what's happening here. Okay, there's a lot going on in this chapter. Now, what I'd like to ask you is, what is happening so far? What did everybody hear as in this chapter so far?
3 days again.
Well, it's the same 3 days. We are learning that what's happening.
Getting ready to cross the Jordan.
That's right. The spies have returned,
Mhm.
and Yehoshua is relieved to hear the report of the spies, and he is making sure that the people are ready for the next challenge of packing up, preparing themselves, and getting ready to cross
Right.
the Yarden. Now, the Yarden River is, as many of us know today, you think about, well, you could probably cross the river in 2 steps or 5 steps, depending on where you are.
Where? Uh-huh.
I mean, if any of you have seen the Yarden River today, you will wonder, what's the big deal, right? Like,
Right.
what's with the crossing here? Why is it such a big deal? Well, the truth of the matter is that back then the river was larger. It wasn't as small as it is today. And what has happened, the river now, a lot of the water has been diverted by Israel to Jordan, because we have an agreement that we will provide water for the Jordanians. And so the water is going to Jordan. So a lot of the water, which is supposed to come from the Kinneret, it actually starts at the Euphrates River, and it starts in
Egypt.
wait a minute, no, not Egypt.
No?
No, Euphrates, that's the Nile.
Ah,
Okay, the water originates in southern Lebanon, not the Euphrates, I'm sorry, southern Lebanon. And it consists of 3 main springs that are fed by the melting of the snow in the Hermon Mountains. And it comes down to the Kinneret, and the waters, these cold waters gather and are discharged into the northern end of the Kinneret, and it goes down through a portion of the into the Jordan River on its southern end. And then it begins to kind of wind down, winding down to Yam HaMelech. And this empties into a drop in elevation of about 180 meters. So what's the name Yarden mean? Here's this amount of water, this large amount of water that is coming, and it comes from the Kinneret going down towards the south into Yam HaMelech. So what is the word for going down in Hebrew?
Yarden, must be Yarden.
Yared.
Yeah, Yared,
Yared. It goes down.
down.
So it's Yud Resh Dalid, Yared, and the Hebrew word Yarden comes from the word to go down. It's going down into the Yam HaMelech, and from the Yam HaMelech, as we know, because the shortage of the water, it's drying up. But anyway, the Yarden is now our focus, and at that time it was a bigger river, and it was a little more formidable, and it was a little bit wider because there was much more water. So back then it seems as though it was a significant river, and that
We keep losing you, Rhonda.
I don't know what to do about that. So what, did you hear that the river was a larger river? It was a more formidable river, and that
Wider.
yes, it was wider. So the entire length of the Yarden forming the natural east forms the natural eastern border of Canaan, and it is part of, it actually lies on an earthquake fault, the Great Rift Valley, and that fault that Israel sits on starts in Syria, and it goes all the way through the Red Sea and across to Eastern Africa. So the Yarden River is actually on a fault line, and gives something to think about if something, if there should be an earthquake there. Okay, so what does crossing the Yarden River remind you of in Chumash? Is there any other episode in Torah that we've learned that you know about?
Yam Suf.
Yam Suf.
Suf, yeah.
Okay, what about Yam Suf?
Crossing it, you mean?
Okay, what was that in relation to?
Leaving Egypt.
Leaving Egypt. Okay. Yetziat Mitzrayim, the leaving of Egypt is
into freedom,
and crossing it into freedom. And this is also the opportunity for Bnei Yisrael to leave their wanderings and cross over into the land that God has promised them. Now, there are very many similarities to the Yetziat Mitzrayim, and there are also very many dissimilarities, and we're going to learn about both. So let's see what happens here. What is the first thing that we hear about that Yehoshua is doing in this chapter?
Tells the people how far apart they should stay as they're traveling, or how
Okay.
close they should be.
From the
From-
ark.
From the ark, from the Aron.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay. Was there an Aron at the Red Sea?
No,
No,
No. Oh, no, there wasn't.
no.
Are there
This was
people,
after Sinai.
right? Are there people chasing Bnei Israel at the Yarden?
No,
no,
No, but what was happening at Yam Suf?
we were chased by the
Chased by
Mitzrayim.
Okay, so at Yam
Different.
Suf, at the splitting of the Red Sea, the people of Israel had their backs to the wall. They were in imminent danger of the Egyptians actually attacking them, and they had nowhere to turn. And to save them from this terrible predicament, God performs the miracle of splitting the Red Sea. Now, by contrast, when Bnei Yisrael are encamped in the desert of Moab near Shittim, they prepare to cross the Jordan River, and they are not under any attack. They are not under any imminent danger, and there's no one chasing them. They simply need to get from point A to point B across the river. So to do so, they could have just used one or more of their existing crossings. There were crossings at that time. It says in the commentary that there were crossings, and they could have just gone a certain direction, crossed over where it might have been a little bit easier for them, crossing points, and zehu, and that would have been it. However, they did not go to those crossing points. They had really decided they were going to go straight from where they were encamped. And so did we read here that no, we didn't read yet. Okay. So what my point is, and Rivka, would you be able to read a little bit more for us? Because I'm going to talk about the purpose of the Aron, but something very interesting happens here in the text that I want to mention, and we need to read about it first.
Which
So
verse?
could we
Leave
first
off?
I think we
12?
need to start at verse
I
7.
left off,
Well,
to start
okay.
with
Okay,
13.
verse 12. Now, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one man for each tribe. It shall happen, just as the soles of the feet of the Kohanim, the bearers of the ark of Hashem, master of the entire earth, rest in the waters of the Yarden. The waters of the Yarden will be cut off, the waters that descend from upstream, and they will stand as one column. It happened when the people moved from their tents to cross the Yarden, and the Kohanim, the bearers of the Ark of the Covenant, were in front of the people. When the bearers of the Ark arrived at the Yarden, and the feet of the Kohanim, the bearers of the Ark, were immersed in the edge of the water, and the Yarden was overflowing all its banks all the days of the harvest season. The waters descending from upstream stood still, and they rose up in one column, very far from Adam, the city that is near Zarathon,
yes.
and the water that descends to the sea of the plain, the Dead Sea, ceased and was cut off, and the people crossed opposite Jericho. The Kohanim, the bearers of the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem, stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Yarden, and all the Israel crossing on dry ground until the entire nation finished crossing the Yarden.
Okay, how many of you knew that there was a miracle in crossing the river?
It split.
No, I didn't know. I didn't know.
No, never
So,
read the book of
but-
Joshua
so-
before.
So
Right.
in this,
So in Oh.
Yes. Go ahead.
In essence, then, it was totally similar for when the Jews left, Egypt. I
Okay,
never knew that there was this kind of a miracle.
okay.
To me, it's just very interesting.
Yes, it
The
is.
whole book is so interesting.
Yes, it is.
Until,
Anyone
until-
else?
yeah, until we find out about this miracle, I don't know if many people have seen the news of the migrants crossing into the southern
Texas.
part of the United States, and you see all these people walking in the water, holding up their whatever few things they're
Fingers.
carrying with them.
Mhm.
That's what I would think this would be like,
Okay,
except that now we're finding out something
No,
different.
no river stops for them.
okay. Anyone else have any comments before?
do.
Okay,
It, in both areas, it makes it a point of saying that that first person that put their foot in the water.
right.
It says that about the crossing of the
Red Sea.
Red Sea or Reed
Right,
Sea.
Reed Sea.
Same thing?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
Reed Sea.
and then it says the same thing about what happened at the Jordan.
right. Okay, now,
First, jump in.
so let's
I
talk,
have
yes,
nobody, this was the first time they ever went anywhere or they were traveling with the Aron.
they were traveling with their own
Did
throughout the
it
day.
always go in the very beginning from the time they got?
No, it-
So do you think that maybe one of Yehoshua's reason was for setting it up might have been because the people there were so afraid and did know of the power of the God of the Jews, that he wanted them to be sure and see that it was with them?
okay, did everyone hear that question?
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna talk about that.
I figured as much.
All right,
Of
All
course
right.
you are. The
Uh,
question is when?
what?
The question is when are you going to talk about it?
When am I gonna talk about it? Let's see if we can get
Uh-huh.
there now, okay?
Okay,
All right,
super.
okay, so what they need, what would happen here now, Yarden didn't split, where they separate, the water separated. It was just held up in a column.
Frozen again, yeah.
And the waters were held up on a column on one side, and it wasn't necessarily
One side.
split with going between two sides of the water. It just was moved to the side and held there while the Kohanim stood on dry land in the midst of the riverbed and held the Aron. Now, the people went across on dry land to the other side, and as they passed the Aron. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. Now, okay, so what if in fact the Yarden River could have been waded through in say 10, 15, 20 steps with all the animals and livestock, certainly not in terrible peril, because it wasn't a massive waterway. What was the reason for this miracle? Does it sound like we needed a miracle at that point?
Maybe because of the ark?
Maybe because of the ark. Well, because of what?
Well, it's heavy, you have to carry it. And the luchot were inside, right?
Right. Okay. They were made of stone.
Right.
The ark was made of gold. If they got wet, it would have been okay. Was there a reason for Hashem to make a miracle at this point.
Yes, it was a sign for them that the way was clear for them to conquer Jericho. And because he gave them a miracle, and the miracle would be accomplished for them to conquer it.
Okay,
That's good.
okay.
And it,
Yeah.
it also might have been part of the same
Rhonda,
thing.
maybe there's something to do with that.
Go ahead. Wait a minute.
Let the, who's going
Go
ahead?
ahead. You go ahead.
Let the
They-
people where they're going to see God's miracle and to reinforce the fact you don't want to mess around with these guys.
Okay.
Maybe it
Mhm.
has something to do like with when a sitter drops, you have to pick it up and kiss it. And this was that, not that it would get ruined, but that it shouldn't be touched by in the water and things like that, that it might get loose and, get flown,
Okay.
something like an ark.
Okay. Interesting concept.
What was the name of that man who touched it and then he died last time when they were crossing the
When in the
sea?
desert, somebody touched it. And he died.
Yes, because he thought it was going to fall, so he touched it.
Oh, that was in King David's time.
In David's time?
Yes,
Oh,
that was in
that was
Shmuel.
late.
okay, sorry, I'm
Yes.
getting mixed up.
I think his name was Natan. Okay, so let's get back a little bit on track. So if Bnei Yisrael could have crossed the river without a miracle, why was it necessary? Certainly, it seemed it
think
seemed like it would
reinforce.
save them time, but is that why God performs miracles, to save
No,
time?
no.
No.
Maybe to give them more chizuk?
Yeah.
Well, also,
okay.
could it have been to reinforce
What is
that God is
With them still.
definitely,
them?
Mhm.
Okay.
I don't want to say the person, but definitely the force behind this, their crossing.
I would
Okay.
think
Like they
Okay.
didn't
To
just
show
run
that
across,
God is actually
but
present.
they
that
had
he's-
to have the faith in God.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All of your ideas and concepts are very good, very thoughtful.
But-
No buts. We're gonna
Oh.
see what. Yeah, no buts. One of Yehoshua's greatest fears was the possibility of all the nations of Canaan, all the city states, the little all throughout the country, would join forces together and attack him and Bnei Yisrael when they were crossing the Yarden. However, had they done so, Bnei Yisrael, their army probably would have been heavily decimated, because the armies of the entire Canaanite country would have done terrible damage to the outcome would have been terrible. However, given that Yericho's relative isolation from the rest of the country, the other city states were probably less likely to come and immediately offer assistance, because they didn't know exactly when Bnei Yisrael was going to attack, if in fact they were at all. They assumed they were. And so the city-states of Canaan adopted a wait and see kind of attitude. They didn't come quickly to Jericho. So that gave Yehoshua some
Idea.
sense of strength, and it reconfirmed that his primary military goal could probably happen without the aid of the other armies attacking him. So because the the Bnei Israel made the first move, and because Yehoshua said to the people of Israel, take 3 days and make sure that you get your provisions ready. And of course, that was a meditative time and a reflecting time and a time in which everybody was concerned about what would face them on the other side. Because Yehoshua told the people what they were going to do before it happened, God sends a miracle to show them that he is still with them. And
in
how
charge.
did the people of Jericho feel about this God of Israel? They were worried. They were scared.
Scared.
They were
Yeah,
very,
scared.
very
Mhm.
concerned that they would not be able to go up against and protect their country. So God says, this is the opportune time for me to show the Canaanites, because the Canaanites from Jericho were about 13 miles from the Jordan River, not a long distance. And certainly they had people scouting around and watching the movement of Bnei Israel. What they would see would be another one of God's miracles. And they certainly would report back to Jericho immediately upon seeing this miracle. Now, on top of their information about the Red Sea and Sichon and Og, they're going to see a third miracle right then and there before their very eyes. And what's that going to do to the people of Jericho? Demoralize them. It's going to make them feel as very, very afraid of this nation. So when God does this miracle, he does it with 2 things of great significance. One is the Aron is being carried by the Kohanim. They are going to go first. Now, in the desert, when Bnei Israel wandered throughout, after the Mishkan was built, the ark was not at the front.
The cloud.
They had the cloud of glory that led them.
Fire.
Then there was 2 tribes of Bnei Israel.
Surrounding them.
And after the 2 tribes, a distance later was the Aron, and then a distance behind the Aron were the rest of the people. Now, what ceases to exist now that Bnei Israel is going to cross into Canaan?
The cloud.
The cloud of glory is going to cease to exist. You're right. What else will cease to exist?
The man.
The manna, right, the man, exactly. And so in order to make the people feel as if God is still with them, he is not going to abandon them, even though they know that once they enter the land, they are going to be self-sufficient. Even with God's help, they're going to have to work the fields to make food, and they're going to have to recognize Hashem's presence in a very different situation. There will not be the cloud of glory and the fire at night, and the well of Miriam with the water. They're going to have to find their water. All of these things are going to change. And Bnei Israel knew that. And so God is saying, I am still with you. Even though this doesn't look as if it's a necessary miracle, it was a morale booster to both the people of Israel, and it showed the people of Canaan that the God of Israel was still with his people, and he had not kind of left them to be on their own and and not be with them. Okay?
How
Mhm,
come the Kohanim were carrying the ark now? Because weren't the Levium carrying it in the desert?
Okay. The Kohanim were now given the honor and the privilege of carrying the
Ark.
Aron, and it elevates them and their status as the leader, the religious leaders going forward into Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan. Now, some people might say, why didn't why didn't Canaan just, after the miracle, just surrender? And there are many reasons for that why they didn't surrender. However, I do want to explain, let's see, I'm going to try and explain to you, first of all, hold on, I have many things that I would like to share.
It's 12 o'clock.
Oh, it's 12 o'clock already?
Yeah.
Already?
Oh dear.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we won't be sharing those things with you today. Next
It's a
week,
cliffhanger.
I was just thinking that term, a cliffhanger. We look forward to next week.
next week,
Right.
next week,
Great.
we will learn about the actual crossing of the Red Sea, what happens on the other side, and there are some very, very interesting things that
The Jordan, you mean, not the Red Sea.
I mean, sorry.
Jordan.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
You're doing a lot of crossing
that
today.
was just to make sure you were listening.
Yes.
Right.
That's okay.
So next week, we're going to.
Rhonda, this was excellent. Excellent.